make the customers curious and educate them, delight them, inspire them. It's a human being behind the screen receiving your email or seeing your ad. So that's kind of what it means with business to human.
This week, we are brought to you by Attest. Attest is a consumer research platform that enables brands to make customer understanding a competitive advantage with continuous insights. By combining unparalleled speed and data quality with on-demand research guidance, the platform makes it simple and fast to uncover opportunities with consumer data and grow without guesswork. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a weekly podcast where I have the privilege and the pleasure of interviewing our marketing industry's leaders about their vision for the future of our industry. I'm on a call with Kristina Lagerstedt, who is Marketing Director of Wolters, Kluwer, Tax and Accounting, Scandinavia. Kristina, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, can you give the audience a bit of a background?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Tom, for having me. I'm super excited to be here and be your guest and to discuss the wonders of marketing with you. And as you just presented, I'm Kristina. I am a marketing director for Wolters, Kluwer, Tax and Accounting in Scandinavia. And we are a global leader in information services, in solutions in health, legal, finance, compliance, and many other sectors. And I'm still pretty new in my role. I joined the company just before the summer. Before that, I spent the last 10 years in different marketing leader roles, working in many different industries, from startup to scale up to global giants. So my background is pretty broad, I would say. And often people ask me, how did I got myself into marketing? And both my parents have PhDs in natural science subjects. So I was pretty good at math and using data and logical thinking. And there was a bit of expectation for me to go in the same direction, but I was creative as a child. I liked to express myself through creativity. I took dance classes, played the piano, played the flute, painted, liked to write stories and poems. So for me, the magic blend was marketing. So I can use my math skills and logical thinking and also be creative. So I went to university to become a marketing professional, and I never regretted it.
So in that varied career, and with that interesting mindset of creative and logical, what are the bad recommendations that you hear in our industry that you think, no, that's not right?
I think from my side, it is that you need to have a background from the same industry when you're applying for a new marketing job, because I often see that as a requirement in job ads. And in my past, I was rejected a few times in interview processes because I hadn't worked in the same industry before. And I think in some roles, like specific technical knowledge linked to the industries may be crucial, or you need to bring your client network into the business. But when working with marketing, I think the most important skill is to master the art of marketing. So if I, for example, look for a social media expert, I wouldn't refuse a candidate based solely on the fact that they previously posted reels and stories about, the industry they previously worked in. I want them to understand social media and the industry and the product portfolio they will learn. And I also think if you narrow down your pool of candidates to people in the same industry, you will have the same group of professionals just moving between roles and companies. And, then everyone is asking why nothing new ever happens in their industry and why are we doing the same old? So to bring innovation and new ways of thinking and new ways to approach social media, advertising, events, or whatever, you need to consult people who have done it differently. So that's how you get creativity and innovation in your marketing department. And, that's also something I really appreciated with Wolters Kluwer, that they focus on this diversity. So my marketing team is quite diverse, when it comes to gender, age, and background, and team members that have been there for 30 years in the tax and accounting industry, and then others like me who just joined, and that kind of gives an advantage. It's simpler to challenge status quo and think about how to do things differently than our competitors, and everybody has different backgrounds and way of doing successful marketing in past. And I haven't had two jobs in the same industry. I always switched, between industries, and by that I've brought new ideas and way of thinking into my new employer. And the tax and accounting industry that I'm now, it's completely new to me, and I find that super exciting. And by that, bringing in new learnings from my past experience. So I'm saying no to having, requiring industry background when you're applying marketing jobs.
Well, you might have just got yourself a whole new slew of CVs with that comment, so we shall see. So that's an excellent hiring and team building bit of advice, but I'd like to get to some marketing advice specifically now. What is your top marketing tip that you find yourself sharing most often?
I would say that we are not the customer. That's something I've heard. So, don't assume that your customers will behave like you or like the same things like you do, because I think, let's face it, I think many marketers are kind of at risk of making this mistake. And I'm certainly guilty of it from time to time. Things like, we shouldn't go on TikTok because none of my friends use TikTok. Or, of course, everybody has Apple Pay because that's, how me and my colleagues pay for our daily Starbucks coffee. So it's easy to kind of, assume it is like people are using the product like you do or acting like you do. So, of course, marketing is like somewhat based on gut feeling, where your gut takes decision based on previous experience, what you know about the target group, reports you read, and so on. But I don't think you should never expect your customers to behave like you and your friends or like a group of marketing experts do. So really use data, ask your customers, observe, understand that they have different needs and behaviors and preferences like you. So, using segmentation, customer journeys, data, insights, and just ask the target group. And for sure, this is a known and used best practice, but I think we all need to remind ourselves of it from time to time, because it's easy to use ourselves as like the reference group.
So moving on now to your shiny new object, which we've never had before, I don't think, but it is business to human. What does that mean? Explain it to me and the audience. I'm keen to find out more.
Yes, of course. Well, we often talk about like business to consumers and business to business and how marketing differs between those two. But I think we should just stop separating the two of them and start talking more about business to human or B2H. So instead of focusing if we are selling to a consumer or a business, we are targeting a human being. So focus on the customer's needs and pain points rather than targeting a generic consumer or company. You still base your decisions on more things than product features or price. Like, do I like the salesperson? Is the customer service helpful? Do they speak to me in a way I understand? Does this company inspire me? Do they bring added value? Am I engaged? So, when I first heard about business to human, it was like, finding the answer to what I've been preaching for many years, that we should not differentiate between business to consumer, business to business marketing so much, because, we're selling to a human in the end. And during my years as a marketing professional, I realized that B2B marketing is sometimes considered, less exciting than B2C marketing. And, why is that? And I think it's because we sometimes forget that human part when we target our marketing efforts to another business. Marketing becomes facts and figures and features, but the thing is, so many decisions are emotional, also in B2B. And, how can they connect with your brand if they don't feel anything? So B2B customers also want engaging content to be part of their buying journey. And it doesn't have to be, it has to be funny or extremely expensive, but make the customers curious and educate them, delight them, inspire them. It's a human being behind the screen receiving your email or seeing your ad. So that's kind of what it means with business to human.
This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So who is your business to human hero? Who do you look up to in the industry? Who do you think is getting this right?
Oh, that's a good question. I think if I look into completely other industry, I think Oatly is a classic, I guess. They really speak to people in a human way. They don't talk so much about their brand or about the product or about features. They talk to people in a very simple way and things that are on their mind right now, and usually kind of in a funny way. So I think they are quite good at it, I would say.
No, it's interesting for you to say that, because we've had Michael Lee on the podcast a couple of times, actually. He's the creative director at Oatly, and he always gets really wound up at the point. He's just like, marketing, it's just a human talking to a human. That's all you're doing. So that copy that you write on your poster or on your social post or email or your website, you're just a human talking to another human, but yet we put an industry in the way.
So maybe it's already doing the business to human, or the human to human, as it's called.
He would be very pleased to hear you say that. Potentially even more difficult question. Who do you think does business to human well in what would be considered the B2B space? Or is it no one? If no one comes to mind, is that part of the issue? I mean, I was just reading through a list of lots of different marketing startups, like competitors to us to a degree, for an event that we're running to get some speakers. And it was so interesting to read through everyone's it was like one slide description of who they are and what they do. And it reminded me of a comment that I heard on a podcast recently. There's the guy from Innocent, I think. He said that all tones of voices on LinkedIn are the same. I mean, that's not entirely true, but I'd say probably 90% of the posts that you read on LinkedIn all have that kind of same tone of voice. It's very risk averse, let's not offend anyone kind of way. So I'm really interested to know who's solved that from a business to human perspective, if from a traditional B2B background.
I think that's actually a good question. Of course, I would like to say my own.
Well, yeah, but you can, by all means, do it. You're on the podcast. Could you give me an example of when you've nailed business to human?
No, I think what we really try to do is to talk in, as you say, not to have the same tone of voice like everybody else. I say the same thing because, as I say, I think we're maybe afraid to use other words. You use the same words like everybody does, or you speak in a very generic way because you hope to reach a lot of generic, people. Like, this is the generic company and this is what the generic company cares about, instead of thinking, but in the end, it's just one person I'm targeting, maybe the buyer or the reader. So I think, but I have struggled really finding that perfect B2B company who does it really well. And I think also when it comes to business to human, it's like broader than just marketing campaign. It can also be like the way the salespeople approach you, or the way their service and support approach you. So it's kind of, you feel like I'm like, they care about me as a person, not just like I'm just not a company contacting them right when I'm calling their support or whatever. But it's a good thing. I should have thought about it really good.
One example of a brand I think does it quite well is MailChimp. They sponsored the Serial podcast many years ago, and I don't know if you've ever listened to the Serial podcast, but the guy who was sort of apparently wrongly convicted has been released from jail. And so they followed up with this podcast like 8 years later probably. And so there hadn't been a podcast since then. And it played this MailChimp advert.
Support for Serial comes from MailChimp.
From MailChimp.
Chimp. More than 7 million businesses around the world
use a MailChimp to send emails, newsletters, and deliver high fives.
MailChimp. Send better email.
Very nice.
I use MailChimp.
You do?
Oh yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, so that's my view of what a really nice business to human type of ad is, right? Like it's natural. It's not in the tone of, it's a sort of classic ad. So what are the challenges with B2H, right? So I'm also a business to business marketer. I'm trying very hard myself for my own business, Automated Creative, to be B2H, but it's so hard. It's so hard. We've got reasons to believe in Automated Creative that we want our audience to hear, and I want to get them over in as few words as possible in a way that makes us sound different to our competitors, right? Like, that's absolutely what part of my role is. But it's so difficult to be human. So what are the steps that you take to make sure that you're being B2H, not B2B?
No, I agree. I think it's hard because you're kind of afraid of losing that professionality, right? You still want to kind of be a professional business, and it's just because your target group likes, cute cats, you don't want to kind of use cute cats in your adverts because it has nothing to do with your business, right? So you kind of have to stay relevant. So I think it kind of goes back to what I mentioned before in like my best marketing tips, to kind of really look at understanding the consumer, right, and the behaviors, and how do they speak, maybe what kind of words do they use, what's on their mind, and try to speak in the same way. And I think also when you're writing an advert or when you're writing an article, it's like, are these words we normally use? Does this say anything or tell us anything? When you maybe use these buzzwords, right? Does this speak to a way that, do they speak like this at the office, right? I think that's the way maybe to start and really to understand what's really on their mind. What really interview maybe customers, doing the segmentation and truly understanding. I think that's the way, but otherwise, but I think the simple, the first thing is, I think, is copy, using copy. That's so strong tool to master business to human. I think simple copies, tell it as it is. Don't use complicated words or overly long sentences, or what's there actually, often it's like, do you want to maximize your impact while minimizing your efforts or something like that? It's like, what does it truly mean, right? Does it mean anything? And really be more clear on that. I think that's one way of being more human. Then I think it's your approach in general, right? When you meet people, when you go to customer meetings, when you like the way you approach people, the way you speak to people, the tone you're using, make that more human. But I agree, it can sound a little bit like buzzwords and like being human, like, okay, as I say, how?
So how do you get around it when your customers are using the same BS that you are? Like I think about my meetings with some of our clients, like they're definitely using acronyms and buzzwords and all of that stuff. Like it's almost the language that we create to talk to each other. So how do you get around the fact that your audience are not inarticulate, but as buzzwordy as you are?
Good thing, but if they are using the buzzwords, maybe that's how to speak to them as well, right? If they are using the same buzzwords in a meeting or talking in the same way, I guess you just have to speak in the same manner. But then I almost are going into a revolutionizing how to speak in the whole industry. But I think quite often we speak in one way and our customers in a complete another way. I think that's a risk, That's why maybe you, as you say, you see all these generic posts on LinkedIn, but neither are really a thumb stopper for you because it doesn't speak to you in a way.
So unfortunately, we are at time now. So if someone wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about business to human, where would you like them to do it, and what makes the perfect outreach message to you? I
would say probably on LinkedIn. So my name is not that common, so I don't think it would be too hard to find. And I think be just genuine, be curious, be personal. I think that's usually what catches my interest, at least. And well, it's all about being human, right?
Yeah. What a lovely way to leave it. Kristina, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That'd just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@ automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.